Apparently you want to know the story behind the tree. Okay, let's start. Roughly around about 700,000 years ago plus, the ocean in southeastern South Australia virtually went all the way from where the ocean currently sits, and the waves used to break just south of where Broken Hill currently sits these days. Over that time, the water receded, and in particular in this area, obviously where there's an ocean, there has a tendency to be sandhills, and this area still maintains a lot of those old sandhills from that time, with some of them generally exceeding around about sort of 75 to 80 metres tall. Obviously, as sandhills sort of no longer become sand dunes, they grow vegetation on top, and eventually a particular variety of eucalypt called a mallee tree started growing on top of them. They're an exceedingly hardy type tree. They do extremely well in areas where there's very little rainfall and there's no surface water. They grow massive bulbous style roots and send out feeder roots out probably around about 5 to 10 metres away from where the actual tree sits. These roots tap into the surface water, the groundwater, and they also capture any rainfall or any moisture that's actually in the soil, and they actually store it inside the bulbous root along with the feeder roots, and they actually store probably close to around about 500 litres of water plus, which is quite substantial. Looking into history, I suppose, we're looking at, well, we're in 2026 as I record this, but in roughly around about 1840 plus, this area started to become colonised, I suppose. The local tribe called the Narkat Aboriginals, for which a big conservation park is actually named after, had pretty much died out. There's actually no full-blood Narkats left, and I've done a complete study on them using library resources and other things. So initially the sheep came, and there were a lot of issues. Number one being the fact that there was no surface water, so bores obviously had to be sunk. There are a couple of, there are quite a few what we call natural soaks, which is effectively where the water comes very, very close to the surface, and you can generally, well, you used to be able to dig down maybe 200 or 300 mil, maybe a foot, and walk away and then come back, and the hole would be filled with water. But the initial pastoralists had issues with everything from dingoes to drought to no fencing, no water. They really had their job cut out. But they managed to get it done, and eventually the dingo fence was built, which is easily the biggest fence in the world. Look it up, you'll find it, and you'll get all the information on it. But it stopped the dingoes from coming to the southern pastoral areas where people were basically breeding sheep and doing things like that. The wells, the bores were dug, and of course that pretty much gave a water for the sheep. The water was actually pretty good quality. Mind you, sheep don't really care what they drink as long as they drink. Fences were built, and eventually a lot of the land started getting cleared. So all the mallee, the bottle brush, just all the vegetation on top started to be scrub rolled, and open pastures created so that they could actually start growing things like wheat, barley, and all those sort of broadacre foods that we now live on and survive on. The farm that I go to wasn't actually fully cleared. The guy that actually owned it was a bit of a environmentalist, I suppose, to a certain extent, and he didn't just want to go through and clear everything. So he left quite a lot of native scrub. So some of the in fact, quite a lot of the shorts show quite a lot of native scrub still existing. And part of the reason he wanted to keep it was because he, like me and many other generations that have been out to the farm since, actually enjoy seeing kangaroos. We enjoy seeing the native wildlife, the birds, the emus, all these things which call it home. Plus, it actually works in terms of grazing because it gives the sheep somewhere that they can escape to during the summer. And it gets very hot here. We had a day only probably about a month ago where it got to 47 degrees Celsius, which I think is topping 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's pretty normal. And that was in town. So out scrub, it's always at least 2 degrees hotter. That's just the way it is. So a lot of the trees were kept for sheep to basically hide under. And obviously I've shared a short where you can see that. And there's a trough also there that they can get water from. And during drought periods, and we've been in one pretty much for the last 3 or 4 years, they do bring out big rolls of hay and lucerne and that sort of thing and leave it around where the sheep sort of rest and the sheep can basically eat. And obviously one of the shorts has shown one of those as well. And that keeps the sheep going. And the sheep that he does have on the farm are what are called Dorpers. Dorpers don't actually grow, well, they do grow wool, but the wool actually falls off them. So if you look carefully at the sheep, they're not the prettiest looking sheep. They're pretty ugly. They're predominantly used for meat only. They're not used for their wool. And the wool can't be collected and spun. It just won't stick. It falls apart. So it's no good for making clothes or anything else like that. So when he sort of cleared all this land initially, he actually grabbed 2 whopping great big pieces of limestone, and one of them was shown in the short, and that's part of the story. And so one was put on one side of the road and one was put on the other. The other one has since been relocated and is now used for something else, which I won't go into. But the one that's sort of still there by the tree has been there since he actually did the property. And the whole point of putting it there was to mark which was his actual front paddock. In other words, his first paddock. So the farm goes back probably around about 8 kilometres from the road on one side and around about a little bit further on the other side. So it was actually, the limestone was used as a marker. Now we started going camping out there when I was still in, well, I'm going to call them nappies. Americans call them diapers. But I was incredibly young, probably only maybe a year old, if less. And that stone was way bigger than what I was. And I don't think a photo was ever taken, but apparently I did sit on it and play around it and, do all the things that babies do, I suppose. The tree, however, the first time I went out there, was only a seedling. So it might have only really been maybe 6 months older than what I am. So the story behind the tree is that that tree is roughly the same age as I am. And I was born in 1971, so whatever that is, don't ask me. Maybe 55, I can't bloody remember. So yeah, that tree is actually the same age as I am. Roughly, plus or minus 3 to 6 months, however long it takes for a seed to get from a seed to a seedling, I suppose. Plus the age of the seed, I suppose. So yeah, that's the story behind the tree. And yeah, I've watched that tree. That tree stands in the middle of a paddock. There are no trees within 200 metres of it. And it's survived. And it survived a lot. It survived the heat of the summer. It survived all the wind that it cops during winter. It's started to look a bit grey around the edges, a bit like me. And there's a sort of a connection to it. I don't know. It's kind of weird when you're sort of around it. You sort of get a lot of goosebumps and things like that. I feel very, very, very connected to that tree. And I can't explain why. And I'm not even going to try to. But yeah, if there's any questions, ask away. And yes, I had to wait until I got home because unfortunately the internet out there is rubbish. And I'm generally working on probably 1 bar of 4G, and that's about it, and that's only in certain places. So some of the shorts, I'll take a video of a short and then have to drive 500 meters to get to the top of a hill before I can actually upload it. But you know, it is what it is. You don't go out there for internet, you go out there for the peace and serenity. But that'll be in another video. So if you enjoyed this, or if you have any questions, by all means ask. I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, have a good day. Bye.